Oh, you're already going?
We're rolling.
Have you been doing much talking today?
I haven't. Nope.
You're
This
not really
is
all
gonna be my
warmed
warm
up?
up.
Oh, this is your warm-up, okay.
My stretching exercises and my first cup of coffee.
Okay, well, that means we have to be extra energetic here. I'm Garrett McQueen.
I'm Scott Blankenship.
No, not like that.
I'm Scott Blankenship.
And this is TRILLOQUY, true and real stories from the fringes of classical music. All right, so now that we're getting our voices and all that stuff warmed up, I'd like to talk a little bit about who we're featuring today. His name is DeVon, a friend of yours.
DeVon Russell Gray.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And wait, this is another red letter day for you because you actually lead the interview.
Oh yeah, it was.
How was it? How was it for you doing this for the first time for this podcast?
I haven't done a long form interview in more than a year. And I found out very quickly that it is one thing to ask somebody a question that puts their art or their music in the best possible light.
Sure.
And it is yet another one to be a white man asking a black man, do you feel comfortable in a concert hall? What does your blackness sound like in music? You know, it was very vulnerable.
And where does that discomfort come from for you?
Years of not bringing up these topics.
Yeah. And that's why this podcast is so important, because those people have always existed, right? We've always been here.
Yeah.
We just haven't been in the conversation, certainly not at the front of the conversation.
And I sat there thinking I really should have put a little more effort in the way I phrased the questions. I felt like I felt simple in some instances, but I think that there's a lot of people that, like we said, don't have any experience in having these conversations. And this is what it sounds like.
Well, didn't our friend Aaron Copland say, "'Tis a gift to be simple"? I guess he didn't originally say that, but
the Shakers.
One of the many things he stole in his career. But that's another conversation.
Okay.
So let's paint the picture of where DeVon comes from. So first of all, I should mention that this opus of TRILLOQUY is going to be formed in the style of a rondo. Can you speak to a rondo in your music theory talk?
All in my deep bench of music terminology. All I know is that it's something that is like peppier and upbeat. Right.
Yeah, well, it actually doesn't have much to do with the feel of the music as much as it has to do with the form of the music.
Okay, so illuminate me.
So a rondo, in its very basic terms, is a piece of music with an A section followed by a B section, with a return to that A section followed by a C section. That sounds weird. Anyway, y'all know what I'm talking about. Followed by the A section. Sometimes followed by like a D section, if not back to the B section, followed by the A section. Okay, so
there's a form, is what you're saying.
There's a form. The way I like to explain it sometimes, I use the metaphor of a shish kebab. So the main part of a really good shish kebab is the meat, right? Mm-hmm. So picture your skewer. You put a piece of meat on there, and then what goes next? Maybe a piece of bell pepper or some other vegetable or whatever. But then next, you have to put another piece of meat. And then after that, maybe this time a mushroom goes there or a different color bell pepper. But you're always returning back to that meat, right?
Well, thank you for using a grill reference. I get that.
Yeah, and you're good at the grill. So that's what this opus of TRILLOQUY is basically how we're gonna do it. There were so many excellent points of conversation that you got to with DeVon, such a long conversation that I thought it might be best if we sort of broke it down and pinpointed a few of those. So Scott, you and I are going to be the A section,
okay,
and the different conversations between you and DeVon are going to be the B section. So how about we jump into this first B section, which I think DeVon basically just introduces himself, and you guys get warmed up, and he paints the picture of who he is and why he is and what he is and everything else.
Okay, so this is your first bit of protein with DeVon Russell Gray.
We're the protein.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, all right. So in this
or
one,
fine, or he can be the protein. The point is, we're going back and forth.
Let's do that.
Okay, here we go.
So here's section one, or the hunk of pineapple.
Yeah.
You know, we got to do better. We don't see each other very much at all, except for through Facebook.
I thought for a long time it was because of the hours you kept. But that's not a good excuse either.
No,
Because I don't keep hours.
you're on call.
I am.
But I do get to keep up with you through your Facebook page, and I was looking through there just a day or two ago. You had posted a story from The Guardian. Pale, male, and stale. Does modern classical music have a gender problem? So the story was about some sort of a compilation album that was being put together, and there was 2 women on the compilation, where there was obviously loads of qualified composers to be included in that. Talk a little bit about you're a multi-instrumentalist and a composer of modern music. So what were your thoughts when you went through that article?
Sad contemporary truths where that's just what we're dealing with now, is a lack of equality and equity in the classical music world. It's still 99% dead white men, and we know that there's so much more out there. Just saw another article the other day that's saying 500 plus operas by women. So why are we bullshit still? We don't need more Puccini.
Right. Well, I was going to ask if you thought that also applied just across orchestral music. I mean, is how pronounced is it for you?
It's very pronounced, especially now that my friends and peers and colleagues are diverse as hell. I want all the programs to be that as well. And we've got some flagship groups like LA Phil that are doing some lovely things. We've got groups that are all black, like Sphinx Organization and Shanique Foundation in London, that are doing great things, but that's because they need to, because these other hallowed institutions aren't changing fast enough with the times. And we're tired of that.
You also shared the article that Garrett put out about it's time for classical music to die. So I wanted to find out your hot take on Nabal Masood's article about, well, gosh, he covered a lot of ground. There's colonization, there's tokenization, making change from the inside. And I think that's a pertinent question, because now you are a composer in residence with the Schubert Club, a 2-year assignment. So how are you going to use that power for good?
What makes you think I'm going to use that power for good?
I guess I shouldn't have made that assumption.
Yeah, please don't.
All right.
It's our Minnesota's oldest classical music organization, so that
Rachmaninoff played it.
that carries so much weight. But I'm going to be 40 on my next birthday, and I've been in this game most of my life. I claimed classical music from day 2. Gospel came first, but then classical was right behind, and it's always been I've always had to push back from friends and family in the community saying, "Why do you do that? Why are you wasting your time on this stuff? And why does it have equal measure to the R&B or the soul music or the hip hop?" And I like to quote Ellington, who says there are 2 types of music: good music and the other stuff. So for me, it's always going to be breaking down walls. Stop trying to pigeonhole me. I don't give a damn about your genre classifications. Classical that term doesn't mean anything to me, and it never has. It was a period of time. And some great work happened during the classical era, but it's just been a misnomer ever since. It's Western art music. I don't like that term either. Concert music. So again, I leave the terminology to other people. For me, it's either good music or it's not good music.
Yeah.
It's an orchestra, which we'll get to that too, but that's also a problematic institution, a monolith that hasn't changed fast enough with the times.
Okay, time for another piece of...
Y'all jumped right in there. Okay, there are several things.
You said keep it trill.
Yeah.
So that's what. Well, Garrett wants me to keep it trill. So I gotta
think about the last thing we just heard him say. The orchestra is one of these monoliths that hasn't changed and hasn't changed quick enough. There's nothing incorrect about that statement. The way the whole orchestra experience looks and feels hasn't changed in so long.
Agreed. And, we talked later on about how it's frustrating for me to think that that is happening, that that him and other people of color, people of the LGBTQ community don't feel welcome in this space.
I mean, and those sorts of identity politics aside, when you look on the stage and you see the musicians, the men are up there in tails, and
Right.
we're dressed basically as fancy as our Western society can. So folks in the audience, when people would want to come to concerts, they'd always be like, well, what should I wear? I don't know if I have anything. And I always tell them, wear what you want. That's one tiny example of how the concert hall and the concert hall experience can be opened up to be more inclusive and more equitable. And I'm using that word because it's a phrase that DeVon brought up: equality versus
And
equity.
equity. Well, you've been talking about that since Opus One, though. I mean,
Right.
that's familiar terminology to follow one another.
Right. I mean, let's talk. I'll give you a hot take, a true hot take when we cut off the mics. But, but my classical music way of explaining the difference between equality and equity. Equality would be for orchestras, for radio, classical radio, for all of these classical institutions to only play black music for the next 400 or 500 years. Then we'll be equal. We'll
Right.
be equal then.
And equity.
Equity is putting a focus on it in that, so that it's included in a way that's fair, and it's in the conversation, and people hear it, and people know it's there. That's equity. So sometimes equity doesn't look like equality. It doesn't look equal, but that's what we have to do to catch up with all this time and all this music that we've spent so many decades and so many centuries not focusing on, and for all intents and purposes ignoring.
So having the tools in order to be successful in whatever you choose, that falls under equity then?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Got it.
Right.
All right.
For me anyway. Another thing that DeVon said that Scott, I wanted to talk about just a little bit. Sorry, my chair squeaked there.
Do it again.
He talked about his family. Well, first of all, he said the gospel came first,
Mm-hmm.
and then instrumental music. And I feel like that's something that so many people of color, specifically black people, have in common, is that the first music we were hearing was that church music, were those spirituals, were those hymns or whatever. And then when his parents ask him, well, why this sort of music? Why is this music more important than the soul and the R&B and whatever that we live with? And what I instantly thought about was pathways toward professions in those fields.
So we're back to access.
Right. So when a fourth grader or a fifth grader, joins the band, they aren't joining an ensemble that focuses on those styles of music. They're joining an ensemble that, if they stick with it, will lead them eventually toward the quote unquote classical music of the concert hall stages. What if we lived in a world where in fourth grade you could begin to learn how to produce beats for rap, or you began to learn how to be a songwriter for blues or soul or whatever? That's another part of that equity piece that's missing in music education, and we aren't here to talk about that this week, but I just thought he made me think of a great point when he brought up the fact that his family was asking those sorts of questions.
Yeah, and I think that what it's going to take for what you just mentioned, I mean, it's going to be hard for a kid in fourth grade to think about beats when, if they have a music teacher, it's on Thursdays at 2 for 40 minutes or something like
Sure.
that. It's just a very small amount of time that a lot of these schools have for music.
But think about that fourth grader understanding the purpose of that education
Sure.
and the purpose of that music. I think that in itself makes it much easier for that to happen.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's jump back in and see what else y'all had to talk about.
In this segment, he talks about the hip-hop band that he's in with several Central High School classmates. It's called High Respects. And that's how I actually first met DeVon. I first saw him on stage for what they call the High Respects Scholarship Show, which happens annually at Central High School. You've been on MTV with High Respects, right? Wasn't Fives released?
Yeah, we've had some good placements over the years.
Yeah.
I think it was an episode of Puffy's making the band, which I just saw is coming back, and I'm kind of excited about that because that dude's a nut, but he makes good TV and he makes some of the good music.
And the scholarship recipient, what do they get?
It's open to anyone who can tie their next stage after high school to the arts. We want to see that you've been involved in the arts and that what you're going to be doing after high school is going to be a continuation of that. So it's open to writers, to photographers, to videographers, to rappers, to musicians, basically anyone.
And that's been happening 10 years now?
10 years now, yeah.
Dang. Did you do something special for the 10th? Because that was just a couple months ago, wasn't it?
No, we don't do special things.
No? We just everyone is a banger?
Maintain, yeah.
All right, yeah. The place was coming unglued, the one that I saw. There was people up in the front row jumping around. I thought, man, this is the real deal. And Connie and Kyle Sisko is who gave me the introduction, you know. So I felt like, man, I am going to meet the band. When you came over for dinner, I thought, oh, man, somebody from High Respects is going to be in my house? You're kidding. Yeah, I was moved.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. You went to Eastman School of Music or Northeastern?
New England Conservatory.
New England Conservatory, that's right.
I rejected my acceptance to Eastman because it's in Rochester.
And what's wrong with Rochester?
More of Minnesota cold and winter. So I was like, I would like something a little more mild.
And was it?
Yeah, Boston winters are nothing. Cake.
So what about the school over Eastman? How did the school shake loose compared to what Eastman's all about?
Boston treated me really well. There's a long time where I used to talk about the classical music bubble, where there's like this protection that happens. A lot of my black friends who ended up going to schools in Boston around the same time as me hated that town because of the rampant racism and segregation. Yeah. And I was like, really? Because I'm not seeing or feeling much of that. But again, there's this welcoming that happens when you're part of the class. Again, that word, the classical community. If you can play, if you can bring it, that's all people really care about. How
do you refer to it then? Do you just say music?
I say music. Other people push back and want to know more about it, and they always ask, "So what do you sound like? What is your music? What's your genre? Who's it?" I don't know.
Okay. The hip hop stuff that you play with High Respects, you're classically trained bassoon and keyboard. How do they inform one another? Because your bio says that you're all the way from Eric B. and Rakim all the way over to newer composers. You know, I've seen you on Facebook Live playing, is it Steve Reich or Reich?
Reich.
Okay, yeah. Thanks. Sorry, I've been saying it wrong all these years.
I've never heard him say his name, so I don't know.
How did the two forms of music inform one another for you?
There's always, in the Venn diagram, what I care about in the middle is soul and connection. So again, it comes down to the good music. Does it make you feel something? Does it make your hips move? Does it engage you?
Yeah.
And with High Respects, that's what I get. That's why I'm still a part of that band. We're a 22-year-old band, and we're still making new music and having a good time because it feels good to us.
Fire away.
You know, that's what Blue Ivy said in the Homecoming documentary. After she got done singing a verse of Lift Every Voice, Lil Blue Ivy said she wanted to do again because it felt good. And isn't it so important for music to do that? I mean, what music is, especially classical music, what it is great, but we don't spend enough time talking about what it does for us. You know, up here at our job, the phrase is the power of classical music. Well, we have to actually think about what is the power of classical music. Some pieces of music, man, will really just make me go deep into myself. And have memories.
What does it for you?
You know, well, it depends what it is. Just certain aesthetics and also time of the day or, you know, or if it's some, let's say I'm listening to one of those Piazzolla tangos or something, all that really great music he
Yep.
wrote for the guitar. I'm in the studio doing a little shimmy overnight sometimes. So much of the music can do exactly that. It can make you feel something, whether it's makes you dance, make you sad, make you happy, whatever. But we just spend so much time. I shouldn't say we, but in general, the classical music community and the classical music culture spend so much time paying attention to what the music is, how great this music was crafted, and how, and all that, and not what it does for you actually.
Sure, because there's plenty of pieces that are being written right now that say things and will make you feel things, but
Yeah.
it's not on par with Sibelius 5. I mean, do we not put it on as much because we're not familiar with it?
Well, and that speaks to that. Now we're touching on the importance of a curator, of a host. Our jobs, because if you're listening to Sibelius, you might not necessarily understand what's going on, but if you know a little bit about his culture. And,
Right.
and about that's what Lee Kuntz was talking about on the last episode.
Yeah.
Really understanding the cultural implications of this music, and just kind of having a way to fit it in your mind into your life that is applicable. It can really do something for you. You told me a story one time about Sibelius and walking radar at the lake and seeing some birds.
Oh, my God.
Remind me of that again.
Yeah, we were at the southern tip of the lake.
But it's Lake Phelan if you ever
Right.
find yourself in Minnesota.
It was on a night of a supermoon. I was listening to Sibelius 5, and I actually watched about half a dozen swans land maybe 30 yards from me. One of the most majestic things I've ever seen in my life. And it wasn't in the right spot in the symphony, but that was enough for me to go, I know exactly what he was talking about now.
What a beautiful image.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into some of the. Hopefully, this next clip is a little unbeautiful. Hopefully, y'all got into some trill conversations, right?
Oh, I hope. Actually, this is where we pivoted and started talking about past opuses, because as a writer, if you get into trouble, they say, write what you know. And what I know is what I have experienced these last several months hosting this podcast with you. So I started asking him questions about things that we've covered.
Oh, well, you're welcome.
So thank you. And I wanted to get into a little bit about code switching and what that means for DeVon.
Yeah.
DeVon is a concept. DeVon is an aesthetic. He's a vibe. You only know it because you feel it. It's in the room, And I've never seen you present any other way than that, no matter what environment we're in. So what is code switching like for you?
I remember switching between just switching language and how I would speak to people. And that, I don't know when I started doing that. I don't have memories of that. But I remember when I decided to stop doing that. I must have been in my early 20s. I was like, there's so much bullshit coming from within. I don't want to have to put up a front or a face when I'm communicating with anyone. So everybody's going to get just the one dude. Sorry to all the children and babies in the world. That counts for y'all as well. Like I don't. There's no baby talk. Everybody gets the fullness.
Yeah.
And same with the music. There's just the one voice, and I don't care if it's the concert hall or if it's a juke joint. It's all the same.
So when you go by Diverge, is that a persona?
I love when people assume Diverge, because I'm not going to push back against that, but it's my initials, DVRG.
Right.
So no, you get what I give you.
I was listening around the lake today to Drone Not Drones on your, is it SoundCloud or your Bandcamp presence, one of the two. What is Drone Not Drones?
Drone Not Drones is an annual fundraiser for Doctors Without Borders that Luke Heiken puts on at the Cedar Cultural Center. And I've been invited to offer a set the last maybe 3 or 4 years.
Like 20 minutes worth of... I really couldn't find the one. Were you just sort of...
Riding the cosmic wave?
Riding the cosmic wave.
Yeah. I feel like I've brought a little bit of a different approach to each iteration. The one consistent thing is I try to bring my bassoon to those gigs because bassoon and drone go together in my mind.
How?
Because drones can be beautiful and they can be obnoxious, and that's what the bassoon is all about. It can be beautiful, can be wicked obnoxious.
Yeah. On Opus 5, Juneteenth, one of the things that Garrett touches on quite a bit is that he feels like he needs to bring as much blackness to this music as he can, and at every opportunity he asserts that. Do you? And what does that sound like from you?
Mm-hmm. So far, I'd say yes. I always bring blackness to the table with me, even though I don't want it to be about that. Again, I just want it to be about the music, but I recognize that the world is layered and complicated. Again, because when I was a student, when I was a young kid thinking about the dream of being a composer or the dream of being a professional musician, all I cared about was, having an immaculate space somewhere in a cabin near a lake in the woods, and I'd get to do what Mahler did, do what other composers did, just open up self to the cosmos, and this beautiful music would flow through me from the ancestors. Just so happens to be that my ancestors are black. So, as Jeffrey Mumford has said, I'm black, so everything I write is going to be black music. Mm-hmm. There's not always going to be another layer of subject matter with pieces. Sometimes it's going to be absolute music. Sometimes it's going to be programmatic. But I also recognize that I have this soapbox, and when I do get to have a premiere performance or have space to offer a thing, I'm going to want to say some things. Or if I can't say it with just the music, it might be in a program note, or it might just be in the other things that are programmed with the piece, or maybe I don't know what it will be. But no, I can't get away from who I am, what I am, and when I am. And yeah, being a black composer right now is important to me.
A friend of mine is a visual artist, and he said that the worst thing that you could do in this climate right now is put up a display by a white heteronormative male. Do you find that happening in music, in the music culture as it is now?
Yep, we're still seeing institutions programming like we're in 1819 instead of 2019. But you immediately get social media and folks pushing back saying, yeah, we're going to pass. We don't need any part of your season. That's some...
Yeah.
Again, you're doing everyone a disservice by having the funnel be this one thing. Who wants just one thing? I mean, none of us can be satisfied with just one chip. I like lots of chips. Mm-hmm. I like lots of flavor. And dead white men from one region of the world, that doesn't do enough for me.
So if you were going to put together a program, who would be on it?
That's a nice question. If we're talking about things that I love right now, it would be Anna Thorvald's daughter. It would be Ryuichi Sakamoto and Alvinoto.
Nice, nice.
It would be Jeffrey Mumford. It would be my dear friends Jonathan Bailey Holland, Anthony R. Green, great black composers. It would be Nina C. Young. It would be, there's just so much right now.
Ooh, chow. Where do we start? So much there.
I'm interested to hear your take.
First of all, whoever this friend of yours is talking about the worst thing you could do right now is put up an art installation by a heteronormative white male. Mm-hmm. He's absolutely right. And that's a tragedy that has been pervasive over the world of art for centuries now. So I actually agree with him. That is the worst thing you can do, for him to say that. I would love to meet him and roast him one day. I'm actually getting a little triggered right now. Do you understand why I would be triggered by that?
No.
Okay, well, I don't like the idea that equity is a bad thing for some people. That's what that phrase sounds like to me. When someone says the worst thing you could do is put up an art installation, as a white hetero normative man, what I hear him saying is all of this cultural equity that the arts is experiencing right now is proving to be a disadvantage for me, and I don't like that. Ugh.
Okay, jump down his throat for that. But in the larger context of the conversation, he's not having any difficulty putting up shows.
That's what I'm saying.
He's
And
still getting grants.
so why would he even say something like that?
I don't know.
Anyway, I just felt like I needed to address that.
Great. You've done it. What else would you like to talk about?
Wait, I'm feeling something from you. So how do you feel about that? Do you think you would be at a disadvantage if you were a composer today? Or any other artist or whatever?
That is such a hard question to answer, Garrett. Probably not.
No, why is that?
Because even as things are beginning to shift now, as DeVon has said, it's not enough.
Yeah.
And when you go to a concert, he listed off, there was 2 names in that list of composers that he would put out. That's all I recognize.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you look at the new releases that are coming out, if you look at the concerts that are being given at the major orchestra halls, Haydn, Brahms, and then maybe some Jennifer Higdon,
Sure.
like one of her short ones.
Sure.
Okay, something like that. It's not changing very quickly, like he's saying.
Yeah.
So I think that there's plenty of time for a white heteronormative male to make some bank in art.
There has been plenty of time.
And it's still happening, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And we need to change it.
Okay,
I mean,
so
and again, not as an offensive to folks like that, as much as it's about showing, again, equity to these folks that haven't had the space prior. Let's move it away from classical music just for a second. There are a lot of spaces these days that I've noticed that are women only. And a lot of men get upset about that. And I don't see the problem because for me, it's very equitable for there to be all women's, I guess I can't think too far from classical music, all women's ensembles, or even if there was a concert there where women were only invited into the space because the subject matter is women-centric and they want the audience to be women-centric, that sort of thing I don't have a problem with. And when you want to turn it over to sexual identity or race or anything, I think an argument can be made for it. I hate the idea that people think that they are at a disadvantage because other genders and other races and other communities are beginning to see a little bit more equity in the arts.
I don't think that he was making that statement as a negative
right, take up
one.
for your friend. Take up for your friend.
It's one little part. I just brought it up because I wanted to see if DeVon felt like he was getting more or less notoriety based on the fact that he's black. That's essentially what I was trying to get at.
Sure.
And I didn't get there very gracefully, I admit, but we got an answer anyway.
I enjoyed it, and we already talked about music making you feel something, and conversation can do the same thing, and I definitely felt something.
You did, right?
I'm feeling it still.
And when you talk about maybe somebody putting up an all-woman composer concert or something like that.
Sure.
It's just like same-sex marriage. I don't feel like if I was married that all of a sudden my marriage is diminished because somebody else gets to do it.
Oh, we're getting political now.
I did not mention one political party.
Okay. Yeah.
Man, you want to jump on me.
No, I don't. Stop bullying me. I already told you that.
All right.
Anyway,
I'm gonna stop bullying you now. Starting now.
So, but what you guys also touched on was, the idea of what Jeffrey Mumford was saying. That quote, I'm black, so everything I do is going to be black.
Well, of course.
And I think it's I think that's an important concept for people to understand, perspective in the arts. And I'll give a quick example. When I have to air something by Frederick Delius, I'm probably going to talk about the fact that he was
on a plantation.
ran a plantation, and not a farm or an orange grove, like they like to say, because that is a part of my experience to understand the implications that that American slavery still has today in and outside of the arts. So yeah, my perspective on that offers listeners a different perspective, because that is something that I cannot erase from my periphery. And, we could go down the list forever, as I'm sure that DeVon does when he writes his music.
Well, I think that really what I was trying to get at is you put as much blackness as you can into this music, but you've got a framework that's set out by the institution that you work for.
Sure.
So it's limited. And I really wish that I would have asked him instead, when you are unrestricted, when you are your own boss, what does that sound like? And secondly, I think it was important for people to hear him say, I cannot separate myself from this.
Yeah.
So when
yeah.
people are saying, don't be so touchy about these race issues or gender issues, and he's like, well, how do I separate myself from that?
Right.
To make you feel more comfortable?
And they have separated us out of it for a long time, but that time is up as well.
And here we are.
Yeah, here we are. So let's listen to the next part, and I'll cool down a little.
All right. Now, DeVon has had some jobs, or at least a job that wasn't as cool and hip as being
All musicians,
a composer,
that's our
and
reality.
musician, right? So there was a time where he had a regular old 9 to 5, and it did not agree with his makeup.
So y'all talk about that here next.
Right. We're
Okay.
talking about the sellout thing where we talked with Peter Collin earlier.
Oh, right, yeah.
So selling out in favor of getting a job that was non-music related in order just to live.
All right, yeah, let's hear about that.
So you're nocturnal, right?
I am naturally, yes.
Yeah. And so this is like first thing in the morning for you then, right? Or did you get up early for this?
In theory, I would saunter in, after 10,
Yeah.
10-ish.
How did you feel working that 9 to 5 job rather than being full-time as a composer and musician?
None of my friends believed me when I told them that the gig felt super corporate. But it really did. Like the structure and the little breakout sessions and meetings, and even the employee retreats to get us to all function better as a team. I was like,
right.
How is this any different than the folks down the road at Target?
Well, you don't have to wear khaki and red, for one.
This is true. I was well dressed. But the mission was on point. Like, I love that what we were about is music
Yeah.
education, and giving young people, middle-aged people, old people, the opportunity to pursue what they want to do with music.
You said that you heard the Ilharmonic Opus.
I did.
That was number 8. And one of the things that the Phoenix talked about was exploring ways to keep this orchestral music alive. And they're doing that by reaching out to younger people through different sound.
Mm-hmm.
How are you reaching out? How are you grooming the next generation of orchestral composers and musicians?
I'm hoping to groom them by helping them to understand that their voice is important, and that history is important. So it's always good for us to know from where we came and to know the music that came before us. So I feel like there's a problem in hip-hop a lot of times where some generations have grown up listening to hip-hop, and they only listen to the hip-hop that's from their time and forward.
The 90s, right?
Yeah. But that's not often the case with classical folks. If you're in the classical world, chances are you're gonna come across some Bach and some Beethoven and some Stravinsky. That's just a part of the way the education is laid out usually. But again, there are gaps, and I'm feeling like it's part of my job to bridge some of those gaps so that they know about Joseph Bologna de Saint-Georges and Jose White and folks who are having heyday years right now, like Florence Price and Julius Eastman.
So with your position with the Schubert Club, is there an outreach for the younger set there? Is that part of your plan?
There's a really great Schubert Club program called Project Cheer, which just celebrated its 50th anniversary. And that program was founded by Dr. Prentice Harris, who happened to be my first piano teacher. She came out of retirement when I was 5 years old to take me on as a student because she saw something in me. So I will have a hand in as much of their offerings as I want. That means I can weigh in and give some tidbits about their board of directors, about the museum, or about Project Cheer, their concert programming. They're really open to any ideas that I have, which is really beautiful. Or I could be an isolationist composer and just be about my own dirty. We shall see.
And what would that be?
My first opera is starting to pull at the heartstrings. Heartstrings, that's a high respect song. Heartstrings.
No, I'm using that. I coined that.
So I know what my focus is going to be the next few years. So all things are going to be revolved around me getting back to vocal writing and large ensemble concoction.
It seems to me like out of all of this music, opera is like the staunchest class, to keep things the way that it is.
And that word, I don't know that I'll actually end up using that word, opera. Again, it's going to be a spectacle that involves all the arts. That's why I like opera, is because it's been theater, dance, visual art, and music. And for us now in the 21st century, also multimedia things, visual projections,
there's a
sound.
Yeah, there's a performance of the Magic Flute that was done with projections that's amazing. That the vocalist just has to kind of stand still.
Well, things happen around.
And then all the projections are done all around them. Yeah, the Queen of the Night one has her, like, it's the soprano's the face of a spider in this web throwing knives. That you should look it up on Google. Just Queen of the Night projection. I think it was Berlin.
Sounds good.
Something like that. You know how earlier I was telling you that I read your Male and Stale article. It's time to let classical music die. You posted that it was important reading. That was your one line. What did it say to you? How did it resonate?
Well, we've been witness to this great, blending or genre bleeding over the last decade and a half, where pop artists and singer-songwriters are collaborating with composers. I feel like, folks like, let me come up with some names, like Bryce Dessner or Nico Muhly.
Yeah.
Are collaborating with Sufjan Stevens. Mm-hmm. And again, taking classical idiom and smushing them together. So again, what is that music? How do you label that at the end? Is it classical? Is it pop?
That's a good question.
Matter?
Because Smush made it on a label of one of your compositions that's on SoundCloud.
That's true.
So what's that mean? What's Smush?
Some of this and some of that. All the good things smushed together.
Your Ice House recording, simple song, you started doing some vocalizing. So how much singing do you do?
A little bit. I was encouraged by my dear friend Chastity Brown when I was in her band to sing, because I was singing backup vocals for her in addition to playing keys. And her fans would come up to me after shows and talk about my voice and how they wanted to hear more of it. I was like, all right.
Were they cute?
Some. So I grew up in choirs and choral groups, so singing was always an important part of my music making. And again, I love the voice. Mm-hmm. So it's good for a composer to flex his own, to see, to test things out,
see what you can write. Yeah. I'm really insecure about my voice.
Oh yeah,
and so like on my band projects, when there's nobody looking at me, I can do it, but I can't play the guitar and sing at the same time. Did you find that came to pretty easy? I mean, was music just hardwired into you when you were born, or what?
Seems that way. I love that old notion that music comes to you while you're still in the womb and says, I choose you.
Well, it must have passed over me because it is nothing but work, you know.
And I grew up disconnected from a certain portion of my family. There was, my mom had an estrangement from her father. So I grew up, again, assuming that I was the only musician in the family. But no, lo and behold, there are these phenomenal vocalists and gospel singers in my family, whom I've gotten to know over my adulthood. And I wish that gene hadn't skipped over me, because I cannot belt out things that would make Jesus weep.
I thought that was an excellent point y'all were getting to toward the end there about how music chooses you oftentimes, even from the womb. And I tell the story all the time about how I'm the oldest of six, but with me, my mom put on the baby Mozart and put the headphones around her stomach and stuff.
Oh, yeah?
And I became a classical musician. And that can be some of the challenge of being one of these others, being a person of color, being on the queer spectrum, being a woman, having those identities in classical music can be a challenge in that we don't choose it chooses us despite our identities. And then on top of that, we have these issues to deal with inside of the art form. Really, a really poignant thing he said there for sure. I wanted to make sure we touched back on that.
Okay.
And then, of course, when when he's talking about all the people who would congratulate him on how beautiful his voice sounds, it is something that I don't think I've mentioned it yet. Listening back, he does have a very very, how can I say, very metered way of talking. A very it's soft to where you can hear. And of course, you have to ask him if any of the young women were cute, because you're always thinking about other things.
I think I'm going to go ahead and push back on you a little bit on that
Please
one.
do,
Because,
please do.
All right, let me ask you this. If someone pays you a compliment on something that you're insecure about, do you not all of a sudden go, oh, okay, well, maybe I can do this? Do you do that?
Assuming that I will be insecure about something, yes.
Okay, thank you for going there with me. Step 2, if this person is someone who is attractive to you, do you not think, oh, well, then maybe this is maybe he or she is trying to tell me something?
Well, you're thinking like men think, but that's another conversation.
Actually,
that's another conversation.
In that moment, I was thinking like a graduate student thinks, because there are people who have gotten their degrees doing studies on how personal interaction and attraction impacts what they are comfortable taking part in.
Touche.
All I'm saying is I don't want you to go for the negative first
Sure.
on that assumption. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Well, let's translate this little conversation into how it applies to DeVon. So, we've been talking about he's composer in residence for the Schubert Club. I'm sure it was a unanimous nomination or whatever.
It was.
And the idea comes up, well, are they interested in me, or are they interested in my race? And again, not to chase the rabbit too far off the track, but that was my point in the comment, were they cute? There's the idea of, well, is this a compliment, or is this a compliment to an end?
To an end. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that, but I stand by it. It was
Sure.
a moment between me and DeVon. And
as I'm sure the Schubert Club stands by their decision to have a black composer in residence. I'm sure that was a very active thought for them.
Yes, and I couldn't think of any other way to bring that up other than to just flat out ask him that.
Can I just say I appreciate your vulnerability? I'll say that. I'm not sitting here trying to bully you, even though you bully me most of the time.
I know it, and I just feel terrible about it. I really do. No, this is a vulnerable point for me.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's about to get even more vulnerable.
I mean, do you worry about that people hire you because you're a black man? Do you worry that how much of a role? Because Mary Kenton in their press release was very complimentary, and he said that your nomination for that position was unanimous across everyone on the board. They were really moved by all of your submissions. Is that in the back of your mind?
It has to be there a little bit. But I hope that it always just comes down to, again, just to the music. Is the music worthy? Is this person's imagination worthy of the gig? I have shied away from offers of commissions or performances that happen in February.
No one's blaming you there.
No, that's totally fine. But I still have one on the books, but that's because it's working with high school kids, and that's different.
Right.
And I can be as preachy as I want to be, and they'll just have to groove on it.
What did you submit?
To Schubert?
Yeah.
A small snippet from my string quartet, which again was one of those soapbox moments. I call it the piece Fractious Child. And it's specifically, it was my reaction to the ridiculousness of the police fraternity in this country. And being a black man, the police are the adversary. And we get killed, they get away with it.
Philando Castile is mentioned in your artist statement. My guitar teacher was a few blocks away, so for weeks I was driving by that memorial. Did you know Philando? I mean, he was on my mind for a solid year every day.
I didn't know him personally. People in my family were friends with him. People in my community, my friends were friends with him. But that was, for me, that was more of a central high school connection and Rondo connection. So when Central High Jazz Band commissioned me to write a piece, that's what was on my heart at the time,
right,
because that's what was in the air. I remember I was in Vienna on my first summer holiday. Took myself away with my unrestricted McKnight funds.
That's right. You're a McKnight award winner.
And I don't know why I allowed or opened myself up to it that particular day, but I finally, went to Facebook or some other platform and watched the video. Oh, it was because the verdict came out that day that the cop was going to be acquitted, and I was livid. So I finally forced myself to watch the video, and I was in a bar enjoying a beautiful beer, and then I was crying, and I was in Vienna, and I was alone, and I just wanted to make my way back home as quick as I could to be around family and friends. And High Respects, my band, was about to participate in a performance raising funds for the Philando Castile Memorial Scholarship Fund. I had already subbed the gig out because I knew I was going to be away, but I just wanted to be in town and with my people. Yeah. So I left Austria, left Europe early, and came home.
That had to have been a powerful experience to be there. What was going through your mind in the moment when you got back?
It was a beautiful performance. Everybody that was there for the engagement of their hearts, and yeah, they were smiling faces because we were all just with each other, and we were happy to be honoring the memory. I got myself to where I needed to be, and that's what felt right.
I got into a little back and forth with some family members on Facebook around that time. And shortly after the election, you remember they were shutting down 94 with protests, and then they shut down 35 with protests. And I was trying to relay to my niece that, I can't speak to the protests that are happening in Baton Rouge or I think there was some in Atlanta. I said, I can't speak to those, but I know that here, all of these things go deeper, and it's symbolic that they're shutting down these highways because Interstate 94 ripped the Rondo neighborhood right in half.
Yep. And the North Side community as well. Yep.
But the speed limit there is what, 70?
That's 55.
Yeah, but people go 70.
Yeah, they do.
Now, Interstate 35 goes through the village of Mendota, 45 mile an hour speed limit. and I think even down to 30 at one point. And I was trying to relate to her that there's deeper wounds that are felt in this town, and they're trying to illustrate that through these protests.
And I think there was some success there.
It was 2 or 3 nights straight, wasn't it?
Yeah. And again, you see things blow up on social media, and you see people being frustrated because their lives are interrupted.
And these people feel that all the time.
Yeah, fancy that.
Yeah. That was some of the big realizations for that Juneteenth episode that I had, because of the major revelation for me was that I can walk around virtually anywhere and not feel like I have a target on my back.
Yeah. Okay.
So a white straight male.
Getting back to my string quartet, which I wrote when I was, 35, 36, when I was an 18-year-old and idealizing what it was to be a classical composer, I just thought you wrote these beautiful string quartets because you had love and beauty on your heart and in your mind. But I get to adulthood and I don't get to write a string quartet that's just about beauty and love and rainbows. No, it's real because life is real and it's tragic.
Okay, so there is a lot to rehash here, and I want to bring something up that DeVon said. I'm quoting him. For a black man, the police is the adversary, period. And a lot of people can't really, especially folks that engage me, from strictly the classical music, or people who have heard me on the radio, they'll follow me on Twitter or whatever, and they'll see me tweet something like that, and they'll have a big problem with that statement. But how can you, I've told the story, maybe I haven't told the story on the podcast, but a police's gun has been to my temple, to the side of my neck, more than once. And, thank goddess that police officer didn't decide to pull the trigger. But, as y'all are, recounting the story of Philando Castile, not all black men and even some black women are lucky enough to have a police officer that decides not to shoot you. And I don't care if you're a composer like DeVon, if you were a school worker like Philando, no matter what you do, that is just a reality that you have to that you have to deal with. And when he talks about going from Vienna back to Minnesota, and then the string quartet he writes, and the memorial concert, that is the stuff of music, classical and otherwise, the power of music to really make you feel and to make you, excuse me, my throat is getting tight, to make you think and to make you reflect. That is the power of all of that. And there's no separating classical music from it. And the quicker that we realize that for classical music to exist in this world, it has to engage some of those conversations, the quicker classical music will be seen as a more equitable institution. Really powerful words by DeVon. I appreciate you getting him there, leading him to that corner of his mind and to his story.
I'm pretty sure that you would have went and dug deeper into that.
But I don't know the relationship between Highway 94 and you said 35 or whatever.
Right.
The police in Mendota gonna get you.
Yeah, that's heavily patrolled.
Yeah,
heavily patrolled.
And now, and if any of them are listening to this, they're gonna be like, all right, well, we need to watch out for Scott because he's out here letting go of our secrets and all that stuff. I don't know. I don't put it past. Look, I understand that there are good individuals who are police officers. My point, and what I'm sure DeVon's point would be, is that the police as an institution is an oppressive institution, because what can I don't think about the police as someone who's going to be there when someone is kicking down my door, or when someone pulls a knife or a gun out on me, maybe 20, 30 minutes later. I think of the police as someone who's going to pull me over because I'm late to work and I'm going 5 over, or I'm walking down the street minding my own business and I look a little suspicious to them. And, so. Yeah.
I'm trying to understand that. And I know that you probably would have went deeper with him there, and I didn't feel qualified. I didn't feel like.
But let me also say that I appreciate your acknowledging that these conversations are ones that you've had with your family and have gotten pushback there and that sort of thing. That's how change and that's how equity happens, when we really face these issues where we have to deal with them. And a lot of people, black, white, and otherwise, have family members who who we need to have these conversations with. And
there's only one family member of mine that's
Sure.
listened to this podcast.
and if and shout out to them.
Yeah.
And if not, the issues with the police, maybe when it comes to trans issues that people are still challenged with, or whatever it is, we really have to open up ourselves to these conversations. I don't mean to babble for too long here, but
We have one more.
DeVon was hitting on some stuff there.
Yeah. I think it might be interesting after he's had like a year under his belt at the Schubert Club if we invite him back and have you conduct the interview and see how different it is.
All right. Well, there's one more non-A section of this Rondo for us to listen to, so let's jump in.
I'm curious about how you feel in the concert hall, in the house, versus on stage. Do you feel welcome? Do you feel like it's a space that you're accepted in?
Okay. Well, again, I was born and raised in Minnesota. Grew up playing in youth orchestras and concert bands and jazz ensembles, and going to concerts of the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra and Minnesota Orchestra and all of our great community orchestras. And I was uncomfortable at first, being the one speck of black pepper in the bowl of milk, but at some point that just became muted, and I just understood that, okay, well, I'm here for the music, and clearly everyone else here is here for the music. But again, so there's comfort. But now, after 30 years of that experience, when I take friends to the orchestra for the first time or to the opera, and it's their first experience in that situation, I get to relive it through their eyes and their discomfort when the people in front of them or behind them are when they're making a little too much noise, or they're asking me questions during, and I'm just like, you guys just need to chill the hell out. We're all here for the music. Your experience isn't being interrupted by my friend asking me a question about what's going on right now. And again, I don't know why they're uncomfortable. Is it because we're black, or is it because we're really just pulling them out of the Beethoven vibe at that moment? I'm like, first of all, you need to work on your own personal meditation and your own concert-going experience, because if you're here for the music, then just be here for the music and stop worrying about who's around you. On the stage, I've always felt comfortable. I've always felt supported. I don't have any bad memories of anybody being overtly bigoted or racist or bringing any sort of into the concert hall. Again, I hope they bring that energy that I learned from Sun Ra, where when you enter the concert space, you leave all the at the door. You come here for this experience. Otherwise, if you're a full cup, you're not going to get anything out of this.
Right. Here's my issue. I don't know if I'm just so obtuse that I'm oblivious to the problems that people of color and people of the LGBTQ community face. I don't know if I'm that, but I thought we were past this. And I figured if there was one spot where where somebody would go, oh, it's great to see you here, it would be in the concert hall. I thought it was for everybody. And to hear, week after week, these interviews of people talking about how they feel marginalized, or I just think I thought we were beyond this.
It's still these Hollywood classical institutions holding on to their roots and remembering that they were, it was court music, that it was music for the aristocracy, that it was music for the elevated folk. Yeah, but that was centuries ago. When are y'all gonna fucking let that go? The music is for us all. All this art is for us all. There are no divisions. They're not real. We can put up all sorts of walls. We can put up all sorts of barriers, but no, the music will penetrate. The art will penetrate if it's good and if there's real soul in it. And I love that institutions like orchestras and opera companies are trying to branch out and perform it in other venues other than concert
Alter
halls.
spaces, yeah.
Totally fine, totally fair. Go to the community if the community's been disenfranchised or felt that they weren't welcome in your spaces. That's a great first step. But again, if you're just coming to the North Side and playing Beethoven, don't.
Yeah, because how does that interest anybody who's going to be listening to the music?
Yeah. And if you're bringing your tokenized black conductor to the North Side to bring us a program of Beethoven, don't. If you're bringing your black conductor to Cuba or to South Africa to play some Beethoven, don't. Just stay home. We don't need you. We'll find our way there some other way. The music will get to us, so we don't need you to bring your politics with you.
You've been really generous with your time this afternoon. I want to ask you one last question here before we wrap.
Yeah.
Your position with the Schubert Club starts
September. Mm-hmm.
Day one, task one.
My first 100 days.
What's your first 100 days like?
Something that I've been cultivating over the last year, so far with friends and peers in my middle age group. I've been hosting composer salons where we come together in one of my spaces or in someone else's friendly space, and sort of modeled after I think it's maybe it's Patty Griffin, who has like a singer-songwriter circle that's been meeting every Sunday for years and years.
Huh.
We come together, and if we're not hungry, we just get right to work, and everybody has their little space, and they do their work. And then we come together, and we can talk about things. If people want to talk about things, what were you working on? How did it go? How's it feeling emotionally? Mm-hmm. What are some barriers, or what's some joy you just encountered? And then after that, we do some listening, and then we just chop it up. What's been good? What's been motivating to you? So I want to take that and expand on that, and absolutely include younger composers, high school age, middle school, however young they may come to us. And Schubert Club is absolutely excited about that idea. They have some listening programming that they've been fostering over the last few seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So it may piggyback on that, or it may be its own entity. But again, just bringing creative folks who have a passion for music creation, for composition, and just having a share space that's open to all, and where we explore everything, where we explore non-binary composers and women composers and black and brown composers and all of the marginalized folks that we need to be hearing more from.
Do you have anything in the can right now ready to go?
I've always got things in the can. I've got long lists of things that we all need to hear, and I've got long lists of things that we all need to explore.
So this is a 2-year appointment. We're going to have plenty of opportunities to hear you live and in person here in the Twin Cities in the next 2 years.
Yes.
DeVon, man, thanks so much for going live on tape.
Thanks for the invitation. I said that before, but I really mean that.
All right, so we're already been running longer than we usually do for these opuses of Triloquy, but there was a lot to explore in this rondo. First of all, shout out to your refrigerator for kicking on there at the end. It was acting so good.
Yeah, it always...
Your beer lab fridge.
It never works when I want it to, only when I don't want it to.
That's how most things in this world work.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, just... So some of the things he said, I'm going to go back and listen to this a couple more times. I think, Scott, some of the things you pulled out of him, some of those conversations were so poignant. So thank you for taking care of this. I thought it was really great.
Thank you for handing off the reins for an opus.
Sure.
I appreciate it. But, I look at it and, to anybody who is listening to this and wondering how to engage, you got to start somewhere. So if it's awkward at first, so is your first music lesson. So is your first time when you go to the gym. You're going to feel awkward and you're going to feel sore afterward. But with time, these conversations will get more cohesive and more meaningful.
So toward the beginning of this conversation, DeVon mentioned that he was trained at the New England Conservatory, NEC. So on the next opus of Triloquy, I talk with a current student at NEC, and he has already decided that once he graduates, he's going to move away from the world of classical music for many of the reasons that DeVon explores in this opus. So I think it'll be really cool to get sort of a similar perspective just based over time. DeVon studied bassoon. David Norville, who you'll hear from next time, he studies oboe at NEC, so a double reed connection there, a school connection. And you're really going to find it interesting what this 20-year-old has already decided for his life. I was very impressed by him. Scott, you were impressed by him after listening back to the interview, so that's going to be next time on TRILLOQUY.
And remember that our website is live. It's TRILLOQUY.org.